All right, so join us for those. I also hope that you might visit our online book center, somewhat newly opened. I'm going to share in the chat. There's a link so you can visit online, Woodland Pattern Book Center. We have, of course, books, all of Kelsey's titles from Milwaukee-based Vegetarian Alcoholic Press. We have books by Ross and Aimee, including New Titles, Beholding by Ross Gay and World of Wonders by Aimee Nezhukumatathil, and many, many more. So I hope you will check out the online book center. And then I also want to say that in order to create the greatest possible access to our programming, we've been presenting events on a give what you can basis. With this in mind, I'll say that if you're in a position to do so, greatly appreciate individual support, and mostly are just deeply grateful and appreciative of you being here and sharing this space, which is the most important form of support. So thank you for that. Okay, so we would love to see you while we're all doing this, but I hope that you'll keep yourselves muted, notwithstanding, of course, those who are taking part in the conversation. All right, let's just enjoy it. I'm happy now. I think that's all of my announcements. So I'm happy now to turn things over to Jenny Gropp, who's one of Woodland Pattern's co-executive directors, along with Laura Solomon, the poet, author of The Hominin Egg from Corey Press, and an excellent gardener and wonderful person. Jenny, take over. You're up.
Thank you so much, Mike. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah? Thumbs up. Okay, so as Mike said, yeah, I'm one of the co-directors here at Woodland Pattern. I'm actually in Woodland Pattern right now, bringing our spirit into the room here in Milwaukee. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to moderate this gathering tonight, and I just want to thank everyone in the room for being here with these four really talented people who it's incredible to gather together. We have Aimee Nezhukumatathil, Ross Gay, Kelsey Marie Harris, and Venice Williams. And of course, thank you to the four of you who are our panelists tonight for this poetry and eco-justice event, where we're going to talk about a whole range of things, from gardening to social justice to writing and more. And Aimee and Ross, I know it's been a huge run for you. You have been doing so many events recently in celebration of your new titles and having great conversations. And thank you for the lineage that you've created there. And thank you, Kelsey and Venus, for joining us from here in Wisconsin. It's wonderful. Before we go any further and open up the conversation, I will introduce each of our panelists. So we have Ross Gay, the author of the poetry collections Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude, winner of the 2015 National Book Critics Circle Award and the 2016 Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award, and Bringing the Shovel Down, both from University of Pittsburgh Press, as well as Against Witch from Calvin Carey Press, and the new book-length poem, which is so good, Beholding, which is out this past month from University of Pittsburgh Press. His collection of essays, The Book of Delights, was released by Algonquin Books in 2019. Ross has also co-authored a book with Aimee, a chapbook, Lace and Pyrite, Letters from Two Gardens. And in addition, he is co-author with Rosechard Warenberg of the chapbook River. He is a founding editor with Krista Chen and Patrick Rosal of the online sports magazine Some Call It Ballin', in addition to being an editor with the chapbook presses Q Avenue and Ledge Meal Press. Ross is a founding board member of the Bloomington Community Orchard, a nonprofit free fruit for all food justice and joy project. He also works on the Tenderness Project with Shayla Lawson in Essence, London. He has received fellowships from Cave Canem, the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, and the Guggenheim Foundation. Ross teaches at Indiana University. We have Kelsey Marie Harris, who is a gardener, artist, poet, and a pessimist in no particular order. She's the author of two chapbooks, The Jolly Queef and Bury Your Horses, as well as a full-length poetry book, Spit Verb in My Mouth, which just came out and it's wonderful. All of these are published by Vegetarian Alcoholic Press. She also has a self-published chapbook, Sex Wound. Kelsey is a Bonk volunteer and editor for Really Serious Literature as well. She is also 2020's Racine, Wisconsin writer-in-residence. Her poetry is fueled by anxiety, self-loathing, and chronic overthinking. Her poems have been published in Rust Mill, Horace Lee's Trash, Forklift Ohio, and D. Reginald. Aimee Nezhukumatathil's books of poetry include Oceanic, out from Copper Canyon Press in 2018, and 3 titles from Tupelo Press, Lucky Fish, At the Drive-In Volcano, and Miracle Fruit. With Ross Gay, she authored Lace and Pyrite, and her most recent publication is her first book of essays, which has also been just a delight to read, a very highly anticipated book, World of Wonders, which just came out from Milkweed Editions. She has just finished a 5-year stint as the poetry editor of Orion magazine, and her poems have appeared in the Best American Poetry Series, American Poetry Review, New England Review, Poetry, Plowshares, and Tin House. Awards for her writing include an NEA Fellowship in Poetry and the Pushcart Prize. She is Professor of English and Creative Writing in the MFA program of the University of Mississippi. And finally, we have Venice Williams, who is the Executive Director of Alice's Garden Urban Farm and Community Garden here in Milwaukee. She is also the Minister for the Table, the ministry that operates the farm. The garden provides models of regenerative agriculture, community cultural development, and economic enterprises for all who engage in its many projects. With 100 rental gardens and an expanded outdoor market space, the garden offers a multitude of other services in the outdoor space, such as yoga classes, community potlucks, film screenings, nutritional education, racial equity events, and reading circles. There's so much going on there. It is an absolutely admirable space. In 2019, the city of Milwaukee recognized her work by honoring her with the Frank P. Zeidler Public Service Award. Ms. Williams is a native of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but has been living and cultivating community in Milwaukee for the past 31 years. So a lot of accolades for our panelists tonight. Before we launch into the discussion, everyone in the audience, please feel free as we go to put any questions you have in the chat. After the panel talks for a little bit, I'll field the questions out for Ross, Kelsey, Aimee, and or Venus to answer. Since we have folks joining in from all over, I figure it would be good to start off to all 4 of you by asking you to offer a bit about your relationship to gardening, like in the context of your city or your cities, how you got started, and the nature of your space or the spaces that you've cultivated are the ones you tend now. So, I mean, any one of you, please feel free to kick this off and take it. Thank you.
Ross, why don't you go first?
I can start, but I got to do this thing. So this is part of my talking. Just hang on one second. I'm coming. Okay. Very unprofessional. Very unprofessional. Look, I just harvested some sweet potatoes. Not this second, but like 10 minutes ago. Anyway, I was just so happy because so you talking about the places that I garden. One of the places is right here. I live in Bloomington, Indiana, and it froze a little bit last night, so we got to get the sweet potatoes out. But you know, the way that I kind of grew up outside of Philadelphia and lived in Jersey City and Philadelphia, and never had a place to garden before I moved to Bloomington. And when I moved to Bloomington, I kind of I was really just riding my bike around one day, and I saw folks kind of tooling around in a garden, like a bunch of people at a school. And I just stopped on my bike and asked what they were doing. And they were, oh yeah, they were doing something with Jerusalem artichokes. I can't remember if they were harvesting them or managing them or like, you know, figuring it out.
Juggling them, maybe?
They were juggling them. And, but they that was this garden that was a part of Mother Hubbard's Cupboard, which is a food pantry in town, and they have these. They had these gardens, these amazing gardens, and I ended up being an intern at one of the gardens shortly after I got here, so probably my second or third summer here. And that was one of my like main sort of entrees into gardening. Like I had a little lawn when I moved here, like after a year, and so that like having a little piece of green to grow in, and having met these people who are doing this stuff and getting to sort of practice and study with them gave me a chance to start to think, about gardening. So it was very much in community that I was thinking about gardening. And then, so I interned with them, and I like to say my friend Stephanie Solomon, she was like one of my teachers, one of my first gardening teachers, because she oversaw the gardening program for the Mother Hubbard's Cupboard. Right around that time, I also, I was kind of starting to get deep into gardening. Like I got the bug, I really got the bug. And I was, reading all the books, and I was doing my little permaculture thing and studying. And this is a town where there's a lot of that sort of permaculture conversation going on. And there was a notice in the newspaper, the Herald Times, the paper newspaper, that my buddy Dave was looking at, and he pointed out this thing to me, which was that there was going to be a call out, a community call out for the potential of a community orchard in town. And so I went to that call out, and that was, I write about this a lot, the Bloomington Community Orchard. It's in a lot of my stuff. And I went to the call out, and then I sort of became involved with the big group of people who was sort of there at the beginning with the orchard, and have kind of in some way remained connected to that throughout. So those are a couple of the ways that I sort of started getting deep into gardening. And it also is sort of how, I'm working on a couple, like with other people, with some graduate students, we have a little garden plot, and we have a little greenhouse, a couple other friends. And so it's, a lot of, I think my gardening experience has been sort of community oriented in various ways. So I'll stop there.
So this is my first year gardening. Started out just really throwing things in dirt and seeing what happens. And then like Ross said, I really caught the bug. I guess the goal has kind of been to get on this path of self-sufficiency. When I really look at it, that's been really important to me. And I've been really blessed to have some really good writer friends who are also amazing gardeners, who showed me a lot of different things. Shout out Nick Dembski. So I appreciate that. And so growing things in my backyard, and then I was told about our community gardens that we have here in Racine. And so I got a garden plot at the Marquette Street Garden and met a lot of different gardeners there who showed me a lot of things, and started growing things there. And then I got really into foraging over the summer. I have a good friend, Georgia, who's an herbalist, and she was teaching me about edible weeds, and just became fascinated by the fact that there's so much free food all around us that we just walk over and ignore and don't know that it's there, and really just destroy with pesticides and, our lawnmowers and different things like that. And it's just goes to waste. But just the idea of that just kind of fascinated me. So I started foraging, and I think I might be one of the only people that's transplanted a weed, because I found out that I really love goosefoot, and I wanted more in my yard. So eating weeds and growing vegetables, and just the feeling that I get when I'm able to feed my family. I have 3 kids, and when I'm able to feed them things that we grew with our own hands, it's just, there's nothing like that. So I just really fell in love with it. And so that's me.
I love hearing about that, Kelsey. And I too have, I have 2, I guess, tweens now. I always want to still call them little boys, and they would be cringing to hear that, but they're 10 and 13 now. But I've always had experience with gardening for as long as I can remember. There's, the old Super 8 videos of me, plucking green tomatoes a little bit earlier than my mom would have liked. When I was just literally in diapers, toddling around, that kind of thing, following behind her. I was always following behind my mom in the garden. And I'm here now in Oxford, Mississippi, and I still feel fairly new here. This is my 4th year, and my parents are now in Central Florida, and they're retired, and they have this extensive fruit garden, and it's the one place, they said, in the continental U.S. where they can grow fruit and flowers the way they remember in India and the Philippines, where they're from. So I haven't been back there in forever, but that's one of my favorite things, is to go walk around and kind of interrogate them about what's growing here, what's not growing. But now here in my own space here in Oxford, we have an incredible community garden here in our community, and I've actually not been a part of it. So I wanted to mention that, not by any nefarious reasons, except for the fact this is the first year where I've been home because of the pandemic. So it's made me realize, like, gosh, I need to get involved. And they're all my circle of friends. I just have never been able to be home for stretches of time that I could feel like I could participate in there. But we have in our yard, we've been starting for the past 2 years now, a incredible, if I do say so myself, native pollinator garden. And it's, I lived in Western New York for 15 years, and I had an extensive flower garden there, and I knew what grew in that time, in that zone. And then now it's like learning everything all over again, and that's been so exciting and frustrating all at once. Like, here in the South, there's a whole nother set of rules that I'm still learning, and like bugs that I've never seen before, or birds that I've never seen before, all are factors in the garden. But on one of the positive aspects of that is that I'm not used to, I used to live where there's lake effect snow in May sometimes. And here in Mississippi, we could plant tomatoes in March. So we've just been, my boys just picked some tomatoes today, and it's still going to be going for a while. So I just love that I'm in a place finally. I know Milwaukee, you're not like this, so I apologize. I don't want to be rubbing it in, because trust me, I've paid my dues in lake effect snow, but we could just be outside for 10 months, 11 months really. And I've just been so pleased just learning stuff about milkweed and false dragonhead and various bee balms. I'm in love with something called American beautyberry. And just to see all the birds and various types of butterflies and fritillaries that come to our garden that I never had in New York. So that's it in a nutshell, in a big nutshell, in a coconut shell. How about you, Venus?
Wonderful. And so for me, even though they would not self-identify in this way, I was raised by an extended family of ethnobotanists. Everyone in my family grew their own food. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, started off in still towns, small boroughs. And to this day, my family grows their own foods. I was raised with, the gardens of my great-grandparents, Choctaw heritage along with African heritage. So I was always surrounded by fresh food. I was always surrounded by tables, bountiful tables that were overflowing with anything that you were able to grow. And that still continues. My paternal grandmother is 101 years young, and she can't plant, but she can point and direct a bit. So cultivating food and understanding that I am who I am because of my relationship with soil and with plants and with the biodiversity that supports me, it's always been who I am personally. I do, direct a 2.2 acre urban farm here in the city. We have a city block that we own and live on. My passion happens to be herbs, so I cultivate more than 60 herbs. Have an herbal CSA, the only one that I know of in wherever, and I just love to engage soil and plants and all of the biodiversity that supports me, and they are my teachers. The soil and the plant and all that flutters nourishes me.
Yeah, that's that's beautiful. I'm 60. I didn't realize that it was so many herbs. That's wonderful. Would any of you like to respond to what any of the rest of you have said at this point? I can move on too, but. All right, we shall strut. So, I mean, I guess you've really, I was going to ask a question about like the interpersonal relationships that you've formed through gardening, but I feel like you've really brought those out already to the conversation. So I kind of want to move into the space of the garden itself, or like into growth itself, however you want to take that. How do you see these spaces or these growths as operating or moving even in your own minds as artists and as spiritual people who love the nature that you tend and witness? This can be in your lives as activists or educators working against systemic oppression in its many forms and against its attendant violences and traumas. And in our current times when sadness, grief, and rage are so present in people's lives, I realize what a heavy topic this is to bring to the table, but I feel like it's worth doing now.
Well, I can speak to that a little bit, Jenny. Just, I mentioned this a little bit in my book, but, I grew up watching my parents who, I always cite them in my books as the first poets I ever heard, the first storytellers I ever heard. But I watched them get taught to, and they have, advanced degrees, they're in the medical field, they're so whip smart. But I watched them as a little girl through high school be treated or talked down to as if they didn't understand English. Like people would tell my mom, who was the first doctor in her area, in her entire town in the Philippines, they'd say things like, "Can you understand English?" Like at the grocery store. And, my parents always had so much grace and they just took it. And just meanwhile, little Aimee would be narrowing her eyes and I didn't have the vocabulary, but I'd be like, I was just filled and bubbling over with rage. But the one place where nobody could ever correct them or talk down to them was in their garden. I mean, I'd see like our white neighbors or anything come over for tips or like, could I get a cutting of this plant or whatever, and my parents too. I would also see sometimes these same people who I would witness them not treating my parents in the nicest way. On one hand, come back and my mother would like give them a bucket of oranges, that are the sweetest oranges in Central Florida. And I kept, they just teach me so much about grace and offering abundance of what they had, no matter, the slights that they might have faced. And so I'm not as full of grace as they are, but they're always giving me such good lessons. And the garden for me became such a safe space. So I know when I was even living in apartments, I would have containers and, on the whatever small windowsill I could have, because it just felt so good to smell tomato leaves in my hands. It took me back to being 4 years old and tracing after my mom, you know, with like a bunch of tomatoes in the skirt of my dress, you know. So yeah, so to me, having a garden is a place of safety and is a place of, I can be, no one's gonna like ask me, the tomato plants aren't gonna ask me, what exactly are you? Are you Portuguese? Are you Aztecian? Which are questions that have been asked, you know, in produce stands, you know, in the grocery store, you know, that kind of thing. So for me, the garden is a place where I learn grace and where I feel safe. And I know that's not the same for everybody. So I wanted to also acknowledge that too.
I
I
feel
think,
like, oh,
oh
sorry,
yeah,
go.
you go, you go.
I was just gonna say, I feel like so often people think about racial justice and eco-justice as these two separate entities, when in reality, you can't have one without the other. You just can't. And I just feel like self-sufficiency is so key and so crucial. True freedom cannot be achieved without self-sufficiency, without learning to grow your own food is so important, especially in the Black and Brown communities. It's one of the most basic ways that we can separate ourselves from these systems that control us. The basic at its core, growing our own food, controlling what we eat, what we feed our families, and not being dependent on anyone else for that. I think it's just so important. It's so important. It's so overlooked.
Yeah, and I would add that the practice of, if you can be in a garden or foraging, like the witnessing of the all of the things that the earth offers us, that sort of practice of understanding how for every single thing we are in debt to the earth, and that we do not exist without the earth, is actually a kind of practice. It's one of the ways that we practice gratitude, you know, and we understand our entanglement with the earth and with one another and as the earth, you know. And it feels to me like, in terms of Kelsey, even what you were talking about in terms of a kind of like how we take care of one another, is to, I think one of the things we have to do is to not imagine ourselves as not one another, but to imagine ourselves as one another, you know, as the same, you know, as entangled, you know. And I think being in a garden and understanding our sort of fundamental dependence on the land and our fundamental dependence on the earth, like we are not here without the graces of the earth. I think it makes us more inclined to sort of understand that none of us is here without each other, you know. And so there are studies, it feels like it's a study in care and a study in generosity, you know. It's hard to sort of be deeply engaged with the generosity of the earth and to not feel to some extent wanting to reciprocate that. You know, like if you get a bunch of persimmons from the tree that's growing out somewhere behind someone's house and it's just like growing, it is I would say it is actually how we are, that we want to give some of those away. We actually want to give some of those away. And there's plenty of, you know, structures that try to impede that inclination, but I think the inclination is potentially stronger, especially if we sort of support each other in that. The inclination is stronger than the structures that suggest we ought not give it away. So anyway, I just feel like it's a sort of, it's one of the places we practice really taking profound care of one another.
Ross, I just wanted to add to that. I think everyone will get a kick out of this, but we had, that we had our first Mississippi blackberry kind of harvest in our backyard for the first time ever. And what you were saying that, when you have this abundance, you just naturally want to share. I was so pleased, but kind of also humbled that when it was like our peak, it was like end of July, early August, maybe end of July, when we just had our peak, we couldn't eat as many blackberries, and my youngest wanted to give them to his buddy who is two houses away. Well, there's a history between us and his buddies. His buddy's dad called the neighborhood association on us for having a BLM sign in our yard. And it's so ridiculous. We also had a sign that said we believe in science, and they had a problem with that. Anyway, long story short, Dustin is on the board, and he just nixed that right away. So now all of our houses in our neighborhood could put up signs just in time for the election, and they have a giant, so they put up a giant Trump sign. And I was like, do we need to give blackberries to them? But my son was looked at me horrified, and so it was kind of a good lesson that, and he ended up giving his buddy and that family a bunch of blackberries. But I had to pause for a moment, because my initial reaction was to keep it not only to people that believe in what we believe in. And it took a 10-year-old to say, Mommy, you're horrifying. What are you doing? Of course we need to give this to Brock's family. It's so good. Anyway, so I just wanted to share that.
One of the things for us during this particular growing season was to recognize that even though for this garden, this piece of abundance has been around in the city of Milwaukee since 1972. It's not a new garden. People always want to say I founded it. I did not. First of all, it found me. It has been nothing but a blessed gift to me. But we understood that in these moments that we are living into in 2020, for all of the things that we have ever done, we had to do twice and 3 times as much more. And opening these gates during this growing season and inviting the community in as a space of sanctuary, as a space where we could have the hard conversations. And when I think about how we are invited to coexist with nature, it's not only about the growing of food, it's also about how we use these incredible landscapes to help people heal, to encourage conversations. When you're having a conversation in a garden, it changes things. It transforms so many things. And so as I look at, exactly what Kelsey said, these systems of these systems that need to be dismantled coexist, and to have an ecosystem that is an urban farm or a rural farm or a community garden. So we did this season walks of whiteness. We have an herbal labyrinth. We have a living labyrinth at Alice's Garden Urban Farm, and we conquered difficult topics in the midst of beauty and abundance. Right now, we're finishing up reading Cast Aloud to One Another, Isabel Wilkerson book, and unpacking it. Yesterday evening, there's an opening of an exhibit. We have 16 6-foot-tall images of brown and black young men. The name of the exhibit is See Me Because, sponsored by Art Star, National Endowment of the Arts, and some other pieces. So it's really also important to understand the opportunity that you have to talk about and unpack so much in what, for me, in my tradition, was the first space. We talk about these spaces as third spaces, but for me, it's the original space. There's a reason why my creation story that I grew up in starts in a garden. Magical things happen in a garden, but you can also be challenged and nurtured and embraced. And I always say that every single thing that we need to learn in life, every single thing, we can learn from the natural world.
It really does give you such a sense of self-worth, especially just speaking for myself at a time when I started gardening where I was feeling pretty low and pretty depressed, and I have been on and off this past year, but gardening has really helped with that. Just looking at something that you know you cultivated, with your own hands, it really feeds that. And also, I'm growing so many things that I don't eat. And I knew I wasn't going to eat them when I planted them. But in my mind, I'm just like, somebody will eat it. I'll be able to give it to someone. So to be able to do that too, it just feels good.
Yeah, I want to sort of second that too. The way that the earth holds us and is really a healing sort of thing, and to sort of be able to be in a whatever that means, some way that the trees or the garden or something can kind of hold us and witness us. And I feel the same thing, like when I'm there's some way that, I'm sort of echoing a lot of what people have already said, but that there's some way that I'm able to be witnessed, I'm able to be cared for, I'm able to be sort of reminded that, I'm okay, in a garden. Like, there are so many ways that the sort of, the garden will just kind of accept you, be okay with you. And that's not to say that, like things that you don't necessarily want to grow where your peppers are growing aren't going to grow or anything like that. But it does feel like gardens are a kind of compassionate friend, it can be a really kind of compassionate friend. And they also, there's another thing about gardens that I think is crucial, is that they hold a kind of silence. There's a potential for a kind of silence where there's some kind of restfulness can happen in a garden that I think, and I'm not exactly sure how to articulate this, but there's some kind of restfulness or potential silence where we're able to sort of connect to some things that are truer, listen to some things that are not necessarily available to us at other places in our lives. So I just want to offer that as kind of one of the things I think I'm drawn to gardens, because there's some things that I can hear that I can't hear often in other parts of my life.
I agree with you. It really, like, it kind of tunes your frequency. I think it really, it clears things up. So yeah. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
So I think it's really interesting to hear everything that you're saying. Like, everyone of you is reaching towards this idea of like empathy and access, like to the space, like within the space, that you would allow, like, something about being around all of these growing things, especially ones that nourish people. Even if you're not going to eat them yourselves, that you'll give them to somebody, or that they are beautiful visually, or like in the olfactory sense, that creates like a greater sense of empathy, and it allows you to also bring people into the space, who you might not, or you have extra blackberries, and would you give them to the people who are going to vote for who you don't want to vote for, and why not? I mean, it becomes a real basic human experience about exchange. And I think that also your idea, Ross, about silence in a garden, helping you hear, and then also Kelsey, what you said about it, like tuning your frequency, brings us like really nicely into this idea of writing, or like bringing literature like into a space, because Venus, I know you do so much of that too. Like you're bringing a reading group in right now with that project that where Jericho Brown's The Tradition is a fireside book, which is one of our favorite books here at Woodland Pattern. Anyway, so to open it back up, I want to ask you how your own writing or sharing of others' literature has fostered like this healthy interdependence with gardening or gardens, and then with the larger world, thinking about that more specifically within poetry and literature.
I have a column that I write called Earthwise for International Lutheran Women's Magazine, and I'm writing 6-7 columns a year. And out of everything that I do, and there's a lot that I do, it's the feedback from that column from mainly women from all over the world that helps me, again, to understand how strongly people are connected to Earth, and how even in this age of all that is not written, how people want to encounter the beauty of words, and how connected people still feel about engaging words. So yeah, we're really excited about tomorrow's Jericho Brown reading, and I'm really excited to join in tomorrow to hear these incredible writers.
Most of the things probably that I've written this year, I've written while sitting in the garden. Sometimes I'll just go to the community garden and not even like go there to tend to my plot that day, but just to sit there and write or to sit there and read, because it's kind of like just a therapeutic place for me. It's kind of like my escape in a way, and so it's just really opened me up to a lot of things and cleared my mind. Again, on what Ross was saying, like that silence that's there has been very helpful in my writing process.
You know, I love being in a garden for the writing part of it, for so many things. And one of the things is that I just am like, when I'm in a garden, my eyes are on in a certain kind of way, and I'm inclined to sort of see things clearly. I'm inclined to see sort of like the small turnings of, you know, the flowers, the zinnias, the tulsi, the all the different sorts of plants, and just sort of notice things, and also notice the critters, the other, you know, friends sort of cruising around the garden, you know, which I think, when I think of that as part of the silence that's so kind of wonderful in a garden, where you can kind of get small, you know, if you join, you know, there's this plant I grow called a Nanking cherry, and it's one of the first things to bloom, and it's a bush cherry, and it gets good size, but it makes this beautiful flush of these sort of pinkish flowers. And there's so many pollinators around that bush. And, you know, and you just like, I cannot not put my face all the way in that bush. And so that the bees are, you know, and all these little critters are so, you kind of become what you are, which is like one of the critters, you know what I mean? Something like that. And to be able to, that, I don't know, I feel like there's some kind of spirit of that, you know, I love to write in that space. I love to write in that, from that sort of energy or understanding. It, you know, it energizes me, and it also kind of like, there's some kind of wonder, Aimee, that's the word. Like I sort of, it's the kind of, if I'm sort of quiet in the garden and quiet in the way that the garden invites me to be, I kind of open to a kind of this astonishment, like, is it possible that this is actually happening? Is it possible that I am seeing what I'm seeing? Is it possible that this much sort of communing is happening? And I think the word for that, and like I can't, you know, that I can't conceive of how amazing it is. The word for that is something like wonder, you know. Like it reminds me that as much as I think I know about a garden, as much as I think I know about anything, I can't look close enough. I can't look close enough. I thought I knew exactly what a dandelion looked like. And then this, you know, in this kind of quiet, the quiet of March this year, I watched the different sort of progressions of the dandelions, and to study a dandelion and just look at that thing for an hour, you realize, oh, I've never looked at anything in my life, which is sort of one of the ways that wonder, I think it's called wonder. Aimee, that's, so now I say, Aimee, you say so.
That's like a nice little tennis lob over to me. Yeah. No, I'm nodding my head with everything that y'all have been saying, because there is, you know, when I feel stuck or something like that, in writing, and then it's like, okay, focus more. But then, you know, oh, I'll check something, or I'll shout out like, hey, can someone, you know, answer the doorbell or whatever, you know, and then I'm like, okay, I can't write, focus again, dial down more. And then before you know it, so similar to when I am in the garden, you just kind of get in the zone and something just unfurls and opens up. It's like you crack open this geode, I feel cracked open, and then all along there was this geode inside of metaphors and music, that it was there, nothing changed, except you just kind of were able to dial down, and concentrate in a little bit more. And when I'm in the garden, and when I'm, you know, maybe I've got 5 million things left on my to-do list, and I'm not really there in the garden, I can feel that. And it's a restlessness. But when I can still myself in the garden and really kind of get to know what I'm growing, or get to know like what is the problem here, or investigate this little creature, or oh, this is a new shoot of something else that I don't think I planted, but here it is growing. And you know, and I don't know if any of you have been so close enough to the ground where you can hear like a snail chewing on a leaf. And it is, I mean, that is, you have to be so quiet. And there, I think, oh, I'm forgetting now her name. There's a whole book on, I think it's called like What a Snail Eats, or how do you,
like the sound of a snail eating a leaf or something like that.
Yeah.
The sound of a snail. Yeah, I know that book.
Memoir, but yeah, the whole thing is, but you know, it's like the teeniest little crunch, and it's a crunch, you know, it's almost as if, I mean, if you are really listening, it is as if someone is eating like a piece of toast, you know, and then you look down like, what is this noise? And then you see this audacious snail, you know, just going about his business. And that's what I mean, when you can really just clear out the world and really just focus in on your garden, you get to see and hear and smell things that you would that maybe just the average person would walk by, you know. And same thing with poetry. If you give it just a little bit more patience, you uncover this metaphor that you didn't know was right there all along, or you uncover this connection to an image that, you know, you had been working on this image for maybe 2-3 months, and then boom, you just have it because it kind of snaps and clicks into place, you know. And you didn't change anything, you just were able to change the way you hear and the way you look at the page a little bit. So yeah, I mean, one similarity I see on both is that there's a lot of revision in both, you know, for me, you know, I'm like, oh, this didn't grow so well here, I'm gonna move this to another section of the garden. Like, oh, that was not the greatest move to make on the page. It felt really flat, and there's no music in here, I'm gonna switch this up to another stanza, you know. So it's a exciting, both situations, both plots are full of promise and excitement, because you can just experiment and what the garden gives back to you is a chance to still yourself and to just, again, like, feel connected and really, really, like, I don't know, just really, that's when I feel like, I don't know, I can just feel it in my bones when I have not put my hands in the dirt, when I have not gathered soil under my nails. Something is off. And anyway, so I love that connection between writing and experimenting in the garden and experimenting on the page too. Yeah, someone else want to take that up?
I think on the other end of that too, for me, I think a lot of times we think about stress and anxiety as a human thing. And I think once you spend more time in nature, you realize more that nature, the natural world, experiences stress, experiences anxiety too. And it kind of lets you know that your problems are not your own. And then
Yes.
you look a little bit closer and you realize how things adapt and how they change, depending on those stresses and anxieties. And then you realize, well, you know, I can adapt as well. So.
I think that was one of that has been, if we choose to allow it, has been one of the biggest lessons. And again, as I said, you know, believing that everything we need to learn in life, we can learn from nature. If we haven't, and right now we're in autumn, but I think all of this 2020, there have been so many lessons in nature about letting go and relinquishing. I don't think there's anything in life that teaches us best how to relinquish and know that there will always be rebirth and newness, than in engaging plant life, engaging the power of the seed. You know, a seed has long memory, right? A seed has long memory, and what it means for us to just engage with relinquishing and what nature teaches us, I think is one of the most beautiful things. We talk about gardening and at its height, right? When everything's in bloom and all of the beauty and when it's easy to embrace it. But I think one of its most beautiful times is happening right now for us, you know, if you're living in the Midwest, and what the soil and plant life and the dryness is teaching us about hope, and a promise for tomorrow. Even in the midst of death, we know that spring, you know, and we got to go through it. So I agree with you, 300%, Kelsey, with that.
Yeah, and Venus, just going off of that, in the questions and the chat, I wondered if other people wanted to jump in on that. Joanna's asking, like, yeah, can you all talk about something, you know, other metaphors besides praise and wonder and growth, you know, like, absolute. So stuff that's going on, just like with what you were saying, Venus, about the onset of winter and stuff like that. And there is, I mean, there's despair too, you know, I mean, definitely there's, you know, and frustration and loss when you plant something, you think it's growing and you could see the fruits forming, and then within another week, it's just like decimated by bugs that you had never seen before, never heard of before. So it's like, that's, you know, it's a different kind of despair, but despair nonetheless, for sure. And there's that quiet that's, it's lonesome. To me, it's super lonesome in the garden in winter, you know. But to alleviate that, I try to plant bulbs, you know, you know, as native bulbs, native daffodils, to just kind of let them grow naturally, you know, not having them in a row, but just to let them, just to see what happens. But you don't get that reward. You don't get that reward of the bloom for many months, you know. So, but despair is for sure something that happens on the regular. Other people?
I get really depressed this time of year, honestly. It's just kind of a dark time for me. My mother passed in 2014 and she passed in the fall. So since then, the fall has just been a dark time for me. But this year, I've been focusing a lot on being present. I have a tendency to kind of escape into my mind, into my head, and kind of close myself off. So working on being present, and the garden has helped with that. I made sure that I planted things for the fall and for the winter. A couple weeks ago, a few weeks ago, I planted more lettuce and some greens and some kale and some bush beans. And so as things are dying, I could still go and I could see things that are still growing and things that I still have kind of a responsibility to. And just that helped me stay present and help me live outside of my head. So that's been helpful for me.
I love planting garlic this time of year too, because garlic won't come ready until June or so. So there is that thing of like the garlic, it'll put its little, sprouts out and then just stay put and just kind of be there. And you're like, wait a second, are you down there? And then boom, in February it's gonna start going some more. And then but it takes all that time to grow, but there's something down there. And I mean, I love that. Venus, I love that what you were saying about there's a kind of, when the things sort of, what's happening is happening inside. That's what's happening in a garden. Like a garden, there's a time where it's sort of abundant above the ground, but then there's a time and it's coming on and it becomes abundant beneath the ground. And that is also like a kind of magical time, but I think it's a magical time. It's a kind of interior magical time. And you have to kind of like, there's some kind of, Aimee, you said the word patience at some point. And I think there's a kind of patience, but there's also a kind of trust or faith or the word, hope. Like,
That's right.
The dandelions are going to come back. We might not, but the dandelions will, and that to me is like, that is a really energizing and like, makes me able to get out of bed,
Mhm.
Definitely. Someone gave me some Egyptian walking onions.
Oh yeah.
So I'm really
Oh
excited.
yes, beautiful, wonderful.
Yeah.
I'd never
Yeah,
heard of it.
Forever, you will have it forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're great.
Well, and we tell our gardeners all the time, people are worried about what's going to happen. I'm like, you don't have to tell a seed what to do.
That's it.
Seed knows
That's it.
what to do. Why are you trying to direct the seed? That's not your power. It's not your knowledge. The knowledge and the power is in the seed, and it knows what to do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's like the thing we might do is ask the seed what to do. It's more like we might ask the seed what we should do. You don't have to tell the seed.
Yeah.
I've been on a mission to let the weeds in my yard grow, just on the principle that if all this goes to shit and the grocery stores don't come back, the people with the manicured lawns aren't really the ones that are gonna be in the best position. You know what I mean? Like I said, there's so much free food out there. It's like we destroy it for no reason, just to have these weird blank patches of grass that are like useless,
Yeah.
And that's ridiculous to me. So my yard's not the prettiest, but it's useful.
Me too. Like I have so much dandelion, and then I just decided to be like my crop of dandelions. Suddenly, I was like this amazing gardener because dandelions always come up.
You can use every part of the dandelion. Every single part is so good for you and has so many benefits. Every single part.
Yeah.
I just learned you can make coffee out of the root. I just learned that.
Yeah.
That was fascinating. Well, coffee alternative. So.
I think was that you? Did you make the dandelion? I had dandelion coffee with you, Ross, but I don't know if you got that from somewhere else, or was that from your crop?
It wasn't from my crop. Yeah, no. But I've been making dandelion fritters and with the flowers and with the greens. Oh.
Nice.
Yes, that's a good, easy to grow plant.
A friend of mine was telling me how even the greens and things we buy in the grocery store, because of what we've done to the earth and things like that, that they're not as nutritious as they were, say, like 50 years ago. But there's so many things growing wild that have such a higher nutritional value. It's just out there for free. And so I fell in
Yeah.
love with goosefoot because it's just wild spinach, and a friend of mine cooked some for me and it was so good. And I've been eating it
Yeah.
ever since.
Yeah. Yeah. I tried to transplant purslane into my
Oh,
garden. It was good. It's so good. It won't take it. It's so good in the cracks of sidewalks. I just love that, but I can't get it to take in the garden.
I transplanted some too, and it took, and
It did? Okay, I'll do it again.
yeah.
Mm.
I'll do it again.
Mm. Mm.
Well, now I want to go eat all these wild greens like in a huge bowl and live forever. Um,
I'm that person now that's like always stopping people, like, you see that weed right there? You can eat that. And then
I know.
It's crazy.
I've felt similarly. I wonder if you all could offer like some influences like for other people who might want to, who are interested in gardening or writing about gardening or anything of the sort, for their own well-being. Like self-care here is really evident. So
Mm.
I mean, one thing, oh, sorry, was someone going? Okay. I wanted to start small. This is pre-pandemic, but I wanted to start small because I just assumed I'd be traveling a lot, and then I'm not. So, but one thing we carried over, and we did this in New York. So something very small for those people who are like, I don't really know where to begin. I don't want to plan this giant garden, and I'm just a beginner here. But we did something called a pizza garden, and it's just really, it's like we planted what we would want on a pizza. So for us, that was onions and tomatoes and about 3 different kinds of peppers. Gosh, why am I blanking? A couple different kinds of onions, actually. Basil, some spinach and stuff like that. So just, it was small, but when we started, it was like 4 things. So I think we had tomatoes, onion, a red pepper, and a green pepper, period. But I found too that kids just loved it because, again, it's kind of that miracle of being able to like to see it from, you know, they started them from seeds in some cases, and then it becomes a slice of pizza for them. So that gets them kind of the bug early on, you know, when they see like, oh, we're eating something that we planted. So there's that as far as beginning gardens go. I think those are very like kind of kid proof and easy for beginners to take on. And you don't need much. It's like a 4x4, and you can do that in containers too.
There's a book called Black Nature Poems that has just really gotten me through this year. It's like one of my all-time favorites. I had it checked out from the library way too long, and then I had to buy my own copy so I can give them theirs back. But I love that. And then also I have found such a huge community of Black gardeners and farmers on Instagram who I follow and who just are a wealth of information. It really helped me and taught me so many things. And I've learned so much there. Some of my favorite farmers to follow are, there's a farmer called Lead Farmer 73 on YouTube and on Instagram. He has tons of information. The Gangster Gardener, he's got a ton of information. That social media can be dangerous and unhealthy sometimes, but I think if you work it the right way, sometimes it can be also helpful. And I've kind of found a way to shift it by following so many different gardeners and things like that, and it's really become more of a positive space for that reason. So like my whole feed is just like plants now, so it's nice.
Yeah, so nice. Leah Penniman, Farming While Black, is a beautiful, beautiful book, and Leah Penniman's out at Soulfire Farm, and they do amazing work. And there's a beautiful book called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. A lot of you maybe have heard of that. It's just a beautiful book about the land and our relationship with the land. Those are a few that are that are right on the tip of my tongue.
I also want to say Iana Planzant is what she goes by on Instagram, but she's doing this thing. She's been doing this thing where she's been collecting donations to build starter garden kits for Black families in New Orleans. And so that's really amazing. So yeah, Iana Planzant, if you can find her, she has tons of information and she's doing some really, really amazing things.
And one thing too, say you have a garden or you're already, gardening and you're just kind of in a rut, you don't know what else to do. One thing that Ross and I did just originally is we started kind of doing these little garden reports to each other in the form of letters. So I don't want to take up too much time, but that's kind of how our chapbook got started, was writing kind of these letters. I would write about my flower garden, then he'd send me his report in the form of a poem, but they started out as letters. So if you have a friend who's a gardener or even a friend who's not, you might just send that person garden reports. Or if you're an artist, you can sketch a little map of what you've planted or keep that to yourself. If you don't really want to share with anybody, keep a gardening journal, and just to see what was growing in your garden this day, a year ago or 6 months ago, things like that. You'd be surprised how many, or maybe it's just me, how easy it is to forget now. And there's something so special about just moving your hand and kind of making a record of it to a friend or in a journal yourself.
One of the things for us too is, seek out the elders in the community who have been doing this for a long time. When I think about resources, if I had done this in our living room looks like Woodland Pattern bookstore. Like I think we probably have more books than you do. And so the power of the book, but the power of people in your community who you don't even know you have access to or understand of knowledge. And I realized that with us, there's a huge gift in having 100, we have 100 rental plots. And so that represents so many cultures and so many stories. But I want to, just a few things, seeking out the elders, but also I don't know if you saw me, had my son go but seed exchange. So like I have a friend, Elena Terry, who came down from Madison, indigenous chef and farmer, and the exchange of seeds. So there are some incredible seeds in here, and then what it means to share, especially this time of year. So she brought me this incredible watermelon that I can't even pronounce it. Arikara, never. But we're gonna, cut it open. It mimics a watermelon that is very much grown on the continent of Africa. And so don't overlook the people resources that are right there in your community. I think that happens quite often, that we do a long reach when all we have to do is tap into what's right here, right at your fingertips, literally. And there's no better way, and we weren't able to do this season because of the pandemic, but having a community garden potluck where even seeds are exchanged at the beginning of the season and at the end of the season transforms everybody's life. So tap into the wealth of knowledge of people that are right in your community, right.
Sorry, someone just turned the light off on me. Yeah, I definitely agree with that too, reaching out to the elders. And then also one of the best pieces of advice that someone gave me when I was just starting and I was so worried, like, what if it doesn't grow? What if, had all this anxiety about it? And they said the best thing they told me is that it wants to live. So just remember that what you're planting wants to live. And that was helpful for me.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think So we've got just a couple minutes left. And there was a question from Nick Dembski about who are your gardening heroes and gardening poet artist heroes, but I feel like this was just answered in a way. There's a question from Christy, and I think this is a good one to end on. What are you most proud of growing, and what's something you've tried to grow but couldn't?
For some reason, I couldn't get that one of the easiest things, and maybe it's because it's the first thing I tried, but I could not grow any spinach this year. It just would not work for me. I found that I love growing okra. That's been one of my favorite things. I grew some sugar baby watermelons. That was fun. But yeah, the okra was very rewarding though.
We had a really good okra crop too in this greenhouse that we're working in, and it was so hot in this greenhouse, so the okra got, you know, like 9-10 feet. I was the only one. I'm kind of tall. I was the only one who could harvest the okra. It was so wonderful. And something that I've not had a lot of luck with. You know, I have not yet grown two things. I've not yet had enough success with watermelon, and I have not yet had a lot of success with like squash. We have squash bugs. They are hardy here, and so I've had stuff come up, but they get chewed up. So, you know, so I got to grow varieties that are just tougher, I think. But yeah, those okra. But I also grow hot peppers, a lot of hot peppers. And last night I got home from my office real late. It was like 1 o'clock, and it was gonna freeze. And I was out there at like 1:30, you know, putting plastic over the peppers to save them. And I saved them, so I'm proud of that.
My peppers did not do well this year. I've got more tomatoes and I know what to do with, but my peppers just would not. Everything kept going wrong.
Were they sweet peppers or hot?
Well, like bell peppers.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
got a few hot peppers, but my bell peppers just, things kept going wrong.
We planted
Now, my simple response, I think the most success I've had in growing something is in growing soil. It's, you know, and we don't think about that enough, but I focus so much on growing soil. So if we grow good soil, then it's literally the foundation for everything else. A teaspoon of soil has at least 4,000 living organisms in a teaspoon of soil. So I think the most important, you know, what I'm most, if I want to use the word proud of, but it kind of grows itself, is the growing of soil that then can receive the seed and is a good, it's a place of wellness so that's what I want to say is, and I think because of that, it's really hard for me to answer the other question, what have I not had success in growing? But I think it's because the soil grows the plant. I don't grow it. And so if I grow, cultivate great soil, then things are really taken care of. I won't go into it now, Russ, but I can tell you about that squash beetle and what you need to do, so we can talk about that another time.
Yes. Good.
I'd like to know about that also.
I was just gonna say, I have not had success with, I've been trying to plant, I've planted 3 of them and every one of them has died. So talk about despair, hope and then despair. Just native cherry trees. I planted 3 and every one of them has died and nobody can figure out why. And I've had elders come out. I've had my actual elders, you know, take a look, my parents, and they can't figure it out. And to me, they figure out everything in the garden and they are stumped. So I have no idea. It's the only thing. It's the only thing. But the thing I'm most proud of is the American Beautyberry. I fell in love with this before I moved to Mississippi. And this is the first year. I don't want to get too excited because I don't want to jinx myself, but this is the first year we have enough berries to make a jam. And we made blackberry jam for the first time with my blackberries, and I want to have this cute little, if you don't know what a beautyberry is, it looks like a cartoon. They're almost like red violet berries, and I'm dying to see what color the jam is going to be. But they're teeny. They look like little BB, like purple cartoon BB gun pellets. And this is the first year we have enough for jelly. And so I probably should be doing it this weekend, but maybe I want to give it another week to just fully ripen. Yeah, so there you go.
Yum. I
I
want to have
went a
some.
little overboard and planted like 10 or 11 zucchini plants because I didn't know what I was doing. But I was able to give a bunch of them away, and then the ones that I kept, I got a crap load of zucchini this year, so that was fun.
That's and so that's the thing, like what grows in a garden too, like that's an instance of like community can grow too. And obviously all of us in our ways have sort of been the beneficiaries and participated in that. Like, you know, if you grow too much and you give all these zucchini away, suddenly you fed all these people, you know, and that just is like a healing gesture into the world. And that's communities, you know, get built with gardens, around gardens. Anyway, I wanted to chip into that, and that's a perfect way, perfect example.
It is. Well, we're
We got these zucchini. Everyone's like, I got some of that zucchini. I got some of that zucchini. I got some of that zucchini. That's so true.
Yeah. So I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'll ask my last question to Kelsey. How big was your biggest zucchini?
Oh man, those things, like if you don't get it, you'll look at it and you're like, it's probably good, but I'll wait another day. You go out there the next day and it's like a foot long, and then you can't even eat it because just when they get too big, they don't taste the same. And so if you don't eat them on time, it's like overnight, they're huge, and it's just ridiculous. Yeah.
Crazy abundance. Well, so we're rolling up on the end here. And I really want to thank you all for your time and your generosity, and for everyone in the audience for sticking on and asking questions. And we really hope that you'll be here with us tomorrow night at 7 o'clock for Kelsey and Ross and Aimee's reading. And also, we have so many books. We have all the books just in here, and they're waiting for you. So if you want to go to our online bookstore at woodlandpatternbookcenter.com, you can pick up any one of them, and we'd be happy to mail them to you or have you pick them up. And Venus, it's wonderful to have you and all your knowledge here with us just for a little bit. And we really respect all the work you are doing at Alice's Garden, and hope to see you out there soon.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Mike, did you have any closing words that you wanted to offer?
Nothing really beyond, echoing your thanks and the hope that we will celebrate. And thank you, Jenny. That's great.
Yes. Thank you, Mike. Thank you. Thank you all. You all are wonderful, and we will see you here tomorrow evening. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You take care.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, everyone.